Bro.
At the escalator. Arrivals. Lower level. Hey! Stop it!
You're jumping?
Although there has always been controversy surrounding Jim Jones, this time has gotten out of hand. An ordinary day at the airport devolved into a furious altercation that could permanently damage Jim Jones' job. Witnesses described the scene as resembling a reality TV meltdown, complete with voices screaming, bags flying, and a point when it appeared as though Jim Jones had thrown everything away. Already, industry insiders are speaking, and the rumors don't seem promising. Fans are split, sponsors are becoming silent, and promoters are retreating. There is a commotion on social media as some people support Jim Jones and others believe that this is the beginning of the end. The true question, though, is how did it all begin? Was the altercation started by Jim Jones, or did he set himself up for failure? And, above all, has his career been ruined by this one incident? You're going to hear something that will change everything, so pay attention. Jim Jones' distinctive swagger was evident as he strode through the airport. He looked confident, wearing a high-end tracksuit, hefty chains around his neck, and sunglasses low on his nose. The day, the flight, and the city were all the same. He had money to stack, deals to make, and places to be. He was used to it, so he wasn't bothered by the flashing cameras or the whispers from fans who recognized him. However, something didn't feel right. There was a heavy strain in the air that you could feel in your bones but couldn't quite identify. Jim initially disregarded it. It might have been nothing. Perhaps he was simply worn out. Then a voice cut like a razor through the airport din from the other side of the terminal. You truly believe that you can just go around in that manner? Jim slowed his pace. Behind his shades, he furrowed his brow slightly. He looked just far enough to see who had said it. He was being glared at by a man a few feet away who was big, mean-looking, and had a tight jaw. Jim's heart rate remained constant. He was accustomed to conflicts and to being pressed in public. It was usually nothing. A hater, a chaser of clout, an imposter. However, this was not like the others. The man took a step forward, his fists clenched. People took notice. There was a murmur among the people. Cameras started to roll and phones came out. Something was going to fall. With a leisurely exhale, Jim repositioned his duffel bag on his shoulder. His thoughts were racing. Was this man someone he knew? Had he previously betrayed him? Jim answered calmly, "Man, I don't even know who you are," in a steady voice. However, such response was incorrect. The man sprang forward. Quick, hostile. Jim staggered backwards after being shoved before he could respond. He almost fell when his foot snagged on a metal barrier. He lost his sunglasses, which slid all over the floor. The crowd sent out gasps. A woman stepped back in surprise, clutching her purse. With wide eyes, a young youngster pulled at his mother's sleeve. People stopped. Jim, however, was not the kind to give up easily. His face darkened as he stabilized his stance and grabbed himself before he fell. "That's how you want to play it?" he asked in a low, controlled voice, but everyone familiar with Jim Jones understood the meaning behind that tone. It was a call to war. The man cracked his knuckles and grinned. This was what he desired. This was what he had anticipated. He wanted to get into a fight. Jim let his duffel bag fall to the ground. "Go for it." Jim narrowly missed the initial punch, which was wild and quick. Jim was fast on his feet and ducked. The instincts took over. This was nothing new to him. He had thrown hands in harsher places than an airport and had been in fights previously. It wasn't just any fight, though, it was quite a show. The cameras were in motion. All movements, punches, and words were being recorded. Jim was aware of it. He could either walk away and appear weak, or he could fight back and risk everything. The choice was made for him by his pride. Jim swung. The blow on the shoulder was clean. Despite his groan, the man remained firm. Rather, he rushed once more, attempting to drag Jim forward by clutching at his collar. Jim retaliated. There was anarchy. TSA agents shouted as they hurried forward. The whole airport was observing. The fight was rough and untidy. Nothing ostentatious, nothing manufactured, just anger. Jim deflected another punch from the man. The man ducked and Jim swung. A moment later, their muscles were straining as they gripped each other's shirts in a battle. Then, whoa, Jim was thrown into a metal railing by the man. It reverberated throughout the terminal. The crowd let out a collective gasp. Now security was nearer. They were yelling. An individual toppled a luggage cart. An infant began to wail. It was really insane. Jim tightened his jaw. There was more to this man than just fighting. He desired to make fun of him. That was not going to occur. Jim contorted, escaping the hold. And then, a good blow. Direct impact. The man faltered. Blood. He dripped from his lip. He grinned as he used the back of his palm to wipe it. This pleased him. He wanted more. However, he was not understanding, because security tackled them both at that very instant. Hard. Jim's face was crushed against the chilly airport floor as he fell. His back was a knee. His wrists were snagged by handcuffs. The other man screamed as he battled. The cameras flashed. It was done, or so Jim believed. Because what followed would make this brawl, which had gone viral, the most significant scandal in his career. Jim Jones felt the weight of the security guard pressing down on his back and the chill of the airport floor against his cheek. With excitement still pumping through his veins, his muscles tightened. He was by no means finished fighting. However, he now had to contend with the law rather than his opponent. Jim twisted against the bonds and growled. However, the officer remained in place. Although he wasn't resisting, the other man, the one who caused this entire mess, was also on the ground. He was grinning. Then it dawned on Jim. It was a setup. Everything was prearranged, including the altercation, the fight, and the fact that cameras were already trained on him before the first blow was delivered. There was someone who wanted to see Jim Jones lose. His worst suspicions were verified by the crowd's whispers as security pushed him forward and hauled him to his feet. Gosh, Jim is having a wild time out here. There is no chance that he will return from this. Bro simply threw away his entire career. Those remarks were more devastating than any blow, since they were more than just words, they were fact. As Jim was pulled through the airport, his thoughts were racing. Who organized this? Why? His name? A competitor in the industry? Someone seeking influence? Or was this even more significant? Was this a case of his past finally getting the better of him? Jim jerked his head in the direction of his alleged adversary, who was now being escorted by a different policeman. Their gazes met. The man then gave a wink. That was it. Jim only needed to see that. It was a trap. Jim's jaw tightened as he made himself say nothing. He couldn't allow them to witness his breakdown. On the inside, though, his mind was racing, because he was aware that the real battle was only getting started. Jim was sitting in a holding area at the airport station, his legs jumping impatiently and his hands still in handcuffs. The police were talking about charges: assault, disturbing the tranquility, chaos in the public. Each syllable struck more forcefully than the one before it, like bullets. The headlines were already visible to Jim. After a violent altercation at the airport, Jim Jones was arrested. Jim Jones, another rapper who couldn't escape the streets. He let out a harsh sigh, attempting to contain his annoyance. Jim Jones' career in jeopardy after brutal attack. Then came the worst one, the one he knew was coming. It was precisely what they desired. His attorney, a well-dressed woman with a firm demeanor, rushed into the room. Vanessa Carter. She was competent, the finest. She wasn't pleased either. She threw a folder on the table and began, Jim, asking, "What the heck were you thinking?" Jim leaned back in his chair and scoffed. Vanessa sighed and massaged her temples, asking, "You really think I started this? It is irrelevant. Twitter, Instagram, TMZ, everyone has an opinion, and none of them are good. That's what matters." Jim gave a head shake. Vanessa's face darkened as she replied, "That was a setup. That dude, he was waiting for me. Cameras were rolling before I even said a word." She understood the logic of what he was saying. However, that didn't alter the truth. The industry doesn't care about the truth, she stated outright. The narrative is important to them, and at the moment, it portrays Jim Jones as a loose cannon who loses his anger easily. Jim felt his stomach clench. He had cultivated his reputation over many years, not only as a rapper, but also as a leader, a businessman, and a mogul. And now, one battle. Everything was falling apart after one pointless, set-up fight. The room's door opened once more. A policeman carrying a piece of paper came in. Flatly, "Good news, Mr. Jones," he said. He paused before saying, "You're free to go." no charges. But Jim narrowed his eyes and said, "If I were you, I'd lay low." The officer slid the paper over the table and said, "Why?" Jim took it up. His blood froze. A tweet was sent from a person with knowledge of the sector. Additionally, it stated, Jim Jones recently ended his own career. Major brands have already pulled deals. The label is considering options. This is unacceptable. Extremely terrible. Jim's fists clenched. They desired his departure. Who, though, were they wanting out to? With fire in his eyes, Jim gazed up at Vanessa. He gave the order, "Find out who's behind this." Vanessa nodded and began ringing calls, saying, "Because I'm not going down like this." Once Jim had been caught off guard. It was not going to occur again. As the city lights flickered by, Jim sat in the back of his black SUV and gazed out the window. He ignored the constant buzzing on his phone. There are too many messages. The noise level is excessive. What they would say, he already knew. His name appeared on every Business Insider's feed, blog, and gossip website. They were discussing more than just the altercation. The fallout was on their minds. Furthermore, it was becoming worse every minute. Vanessa was arguing with someone from the label on the phone, her voice piercing. "No, pay attention to me. It would be a mistake to revoke his endorsements. It was a setup. We have evidence. The footage is now being worked on by my team." Jim let out a slow exhale. Evidence. He hoped it was with them. For what if they didn't? He was done. Outside his penthouse, the SUV stopped. Jim avoided the surrounding flashing cameras by stepping outside with his hood drawn low over his head. Outside, paparazzi had already set their shop. They detected the scent of blood. Locking the door behind him, he entered. Quiet. He was alone for the first time since the fight. At last, he took out his phone and began to browse the messages. Everybody had something to say. Cameron. Dude, what the happened? Jules Santana. They're trying to bury you, man. Call me. Are you okay? Jim rolled his eyes as Azalea Banks said, LMFAOOO, I knew ATTT. Azalea had to say something, of course. Then he noticed one message. Unknown number, you ought to have kept quiet. You will now have to learn the hard way. Jim stopped. What on earth? He typed back swiftly. Jim? Who is this? No answer. His heart thumping, he gazed at the screen. This was no ordinary internet troll. This individual was acquainted with him. Someone who wished to remove him from the game. His thoughts were racing. Who benefited the most from this? The labels. He had already spoken out against bad contracts. Perhaps someone had finally had enough of his chatter. A competitor? Not likely. The majority of them were too preoccupied with their personal drama. Or was it a former acquaintance? Jim gave his temples a rub. He required clarification. Once more, his phone buzzed. It was Vanessa this time. We have an issue, Jim. Jim and Vanessa met at a downtown private office. She didn't appear content. A tablet was slid across the table by her. Take note of this. Jim hit the play button. It was fresh video of the altercation. Not just any footage, though. It came from a different perspective. Jim was about to get up and leave when the other man sneered and muttered something. Jim watched the playback, leaning closer. Now is the moment. The cameras are rolling. Jim felt sick to his stomach. He was set up, truly. However, it wasn't even the worst. The video then cut to two males standing in the background and observing. Jim recognized them right away. Music executives. And not just any executives, but those who had spent months attempting to persuade him to sign a new contract. He glanced up at Vanessa. This is what they did. She gave a nod. They want you to leave. They aren't being subtle either. Jim's hands clenched. It was war. The headlines were worse the following morning. Amidst the incident, the record label separates itself from Jim Jones. Jim Jones drove Pete by major brands after airport fight. Jim Jones' career is OVR, according to insiders. Jim tossed his phone across the room. They were on the go, too quickly. With her laptop in hand, Vanessa rushed inside the room. Jim let out a quick exhale. We need to get ahead of this. How? She paused. You will not enjoy it. Jim waited while glancing at her. She inhaled deeply. Jim looked at her as if she had gone insane and said, You need to apologize. No way. Vanessa let out a sigh. Listen, Jim. If you don't stand up, the industry will dominate the narrative. This is about perception, not right or wrong. And after that, you'll never recover from this. Jim rubbed his face and leaned back. So what? I just plead for pardon on Instagram. Vanessa gave a head shake. No, we're clever. We create a statement and say that you were provoked. That you will not allow this to define you, even though you regret the way things turned out. Jim sighed. He detested this. However, she was correct. They were after everything he had constructed, and he would lose everything if he didn't fight back. Gazing at the camera before him, Jim inhaled deeply. He did not desire this. He never imagined that he would need to protect himself in this way. He was about to record a statement that would determine his destiny, but here he was. With her arms folded and her gaze sullen, Vanessa stood behind the camera. Jim, just be honest. Don't give them additional ammunition, but say what needs to be said. Jim wiped a hand across his face and nodded. He hit the record button. Hey, how are you all doing? This is Jim. Let me tell you how insane the last few days have been. I'm sure you've seen the headlines, the videos, and the rumors, and everyone has something to say about what transpired at the airport. So allow me to correct the record. He sighed, carefully selecting his words. Yeah, I won't sit here and pretend that wasn't me. Was I in a fight? You don't see what happened before that clip began to play. You don't hear what was spoken to me, and the folks promoting this narrative are aware of this. That's what they're not telling you, though. Jim's jaw tensed as he leaned forward, saying, Look, I'm not perfect. I made mistakes, but don't let these blogs and industry folks fool you. They're setting me up to fail. This wasn't just a chance occurrence. This was prearranged. He paused for a moment, considering whether or not to express his true feelings. Screw it. These labels, these executives, for a minute, they had been attempting to push me away. I've been speaking out about their unethical behavior, how they defraud artists, and how they take advantage of our hardships. Now, as soon as they have a chance, they portray me as the bad guy. The fight isn't the point. It has to do with control. Vanessa nodded slightly, letting him know he was headed in the right direction. Jim went on. I understand what's happening. They wish to suppress me as another artist. They can now check off another name off their list. I'm not going anywhere, though, let me tell you that. They attempted to destroy my career, but I was able to build it on loyalty and genuine fans. And you all know the truth if you've been grooving with me from the beginning. In an attempt to regain his composure, he inhaled deeply. I'm not pleading for pity. I'm not asking you to take sides. I only ask that you do your own research. Don't be duped by these industry games. Jim turned off the camera. Quiet. With a sigh, Vanessa moved forward. That was a good one. Now, though, is the challenging part. Jim scowled. What do you mean? She displayed a news story on her laptop as she turned it around. Jim Jones was devastated to read. Rock Nation cuts ties with Jim Jones amid airport fight controversy. This was more than just awful. This was the end of my career. He grabbed the laptop and started reading the article. He wasn't simply being dropped by the label. He was being blackballed. He had a violent past, according to sources. They were burying him alive, saying he was unprofessional and a liability. Jim's hands clenched. This is what they had always desired. Vanessa let out a sigh. We can defeat this. However, Jim, this is no longer merely a PR issue. They want your money, your transactions, everything. Jim averted his gaze as his thoughts raced. They had more in mind than simply damaging his reputation. His erasure was their goal. Reaching for his phone, he dialed a number he never would have imagined to contact. Hey, Cam, we must speak. There was a long silence, followed by laughter. Knew this day was coming. Now what's the issue? Jim rubbed his temple and breathed. Did you see the news? Sneered Cameron. Everyone saw it, dude. You're in style as if you just released a hit album. What on earth took place? Cam paused, then sighed. You ever feel like they try to push you out? Like, no matter what you do, they waiting for you to slip. Jim paced the room, trying to maintain a steady tone of speech. Every day. However, Jim, you need to inform me if there is more to this or if this was just an airport altercation. Jim paused, wanting to tell him everything, the setup, the way he was singled out by security, and how the industry was taking advantage of everything to ruin him. Cameron appeared to notice the hesitancy, though, and asked, Look, dude, we haven't always gotten along, you know. However, this isn't the same. What do you think will happen to the rest of us if they blackball you? They're not just watching you. Jim sat down and rubbed his face. What should I do now? Cam's voice trailed off. You defend yourself. but not in the way they anticipate. Jim's eyebrows went up. What do you mean? Cam laughed and said, you'll see. Come see me in Harlem. We have work to do. Jim looked at his phone for a long time before letting out a sigh. Jim was officially a problem, and the industry had a long history of turning on artists the moment they became inconvenient. Cameron wasn't wrong. If they could do this to him, they could do it to anyone. So, what's the plan? Vanessa eyed him intently. We take control of the story. Jim got up and cracked his knuckles. Vanessa nodded, and Jim shook his head, saying, well, so we do more interviews? Put out more statements. We go larger. 2 days later, the room was electric with energy, cameras set up, a buzzing throng, and Jim Jones at the center of it all, flanked by Cameron, Jules Santana, and a few other members of Dipset. This was no ordinary press conference. You all know me. I have never been one to bite my tongue, and I damn sure ain't about to start now. Jim said, adjusting the microphone while glancing out at the sea of faces in front of him, which included fans, journalists, and business insiders who had come to hear him speak. They're trying to convince you that I'm done, that this one incident defines my entire career, that I'm out of control, reckless, and a liability, but let me tell you something. I built this, the audience whispered, waiting. They're trying to blackball me, Cameron grinned knowingly, and Jules nodded in accord. Ain't no label, no exec, no industry insider ever gave me nothing. Everything I got, I earned it. The crowd exploded. Jim went on, his voice firm but passionate. I made a mistake at that airport, yeah. Closed doors on me. But here's what they don't get. You can't cancel somebody who never needed your approval in the first place. I'm not flawless, but what you're not asking is, why was I targeted? Why was I even put in that situation? Why does the entire industry move to erase me the second something happens? The journalist hurried to record notes. This ain't just about me. This about every artist they done threw away. Every artist they used up and tossed aside. Jim said, exposing the game rather than merely defending himself. And let's be honest, this fight? Y'all really think this just happened to me overnight? Nah, they've been waiting for the right opportunity to get rid of me. Cameron took the mic. Jim reclaimed the microphone. This so-called career-ending scandal, that's just an excuse. They don't like it when one of us speaks too loud, but we're not going anywhere. So what happens now? Do they ban my radio play? That's fine. Do they cut my deals? That's cool. Jules smiled and said, facts. You can't stop what's real. I built this from the ground up once. I'll do it again. But you can be sure I'm not quitting. Y'all tried to destroy my career, but all y'all did was wake me up. Jim said, staring straight into the cameras as though addressing the labels themselves. Drop the mic. Walk off. As Vanessa paced with her phone in hand, Jim fell back against the wall, finally feeling the effects of tiredness. That was insane. The fans are going crazy. It's trending already. Hashtag Jermaine Doan is everywhere. Jim's phone buzzed with an unknown number before Vanessa could reply, so he paused before answering. Good. Now let's see if they still try to erase me. Yeah, said a deep voice. Jones, that was quite the show. Jim's eyes furrowed. Jim looked at Vanessa before leaving the crowd. Who is this? He asked, laughing. Let's just say I'm someone who doesn't like the way the industry plays their game either. And I might have a way to get you back in, on your terms. The call went on, but the screen went black. I'm listening. However, what are your thoughts? Is this merely another maneuver by industry elites, or is Jim Jones actually being blackballed? Is this the start of a huge comeback, or did the fight at the airport really damage his career? Tell us in the comments if you believe Jim can recover from this, or if the harm has already been done. Will the industry ever treat him the same way if he returns? If you're in love with Jim and want to watch him disprove everyone, be sure to hit the like button. I assure you that this story is far from ended, so don't forget to subscribe and enable notifications so you don't miss the next one. Don't worry, the truth will eventually be revealed.